Good evening, and thanks so much for joining us tonight for our first Friday night coffee table community discussion. I am Michael Jackson Hymos, and on behalf of the Morgan-Wixson, we're really glad you're here for this important conversation. The DEI committee at the Morgan-Wixson has been working over the last year on a cultural paradigm shift, working to make our theater a place of inclusion with equity for all and diversity in all areas of the organization. This work began and begins with a hard look at ourselves, taking accountability for past decisions and fully embodying the promise of our mission statement to be a cultural hub for the entire community. In support of Black Lives Matter, we will be using our platform to amplify Black and POC voices and visions. One of the things we're doing is holding these monthly community discussions, an intentional space to foster understanding through the sharing of experiences and making us think about things we haven't thought about. During these discussions, we invite you to use the chat and Q&A features down below in your control strip. The panelists will get to as many of your questions as possible during the evening. Our upcoming discussions, we have community outreach and being proactive members of the theater community on July 24th, Casting Talk, Colorblind versus Color Conscious on August 14th, and Initiative for Actors of Color Hair, Makeup, and Body Presentation on September 4th, and more to follow. But tonight we start with our first discussion, We Are America, What Does It Mean to Be Black? What Does It Mean to Be White? And we are so grateful to have Cori Goldberg and Tisha Murphy here with us. They are friends and teachers at John Adams Middle School in Santa Monica, where they have very similar jobs, but very different experiences. Welcome to Cori and Tisha. Hi, ladies.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. You know, these community discussions are discussions. It's not all settled in one evening, and we're just so grateful that you two are starting us off on the path to new experiences and new information.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll see you later.
Okay, thank you.
I'll see you later. We're going to see you now.
Of course. So first of all, I want to take this opportunity to thank all of you for giving up your Hamilton night. We're quite aware that Hamilton did drop, and you're actually choosing to be with us versus seeing the show tonight, but you could always stream it. My name is Cori Goldberg.
And I'm Tisha Murphy. We both grew up being tokens in our community. We both went to UCLA. We both have teaching credentials. We both hold a master's degree, but we both have very, very different experiences that we'd like to share with you. And before we even begin, I just want to say that Cori and I are not experts in this. We are not professors of racism. We're not professors of racial equality. None of that. We don't have doctorate degrees about that. But what we are two people that have experienced things in life, and our experiences have been different. And we'd just like to share it with you.
Thank you. So before we get started, I want to take this opportunity to thank the Morgan-Wixson Theater for hosting this and asking us to be involved. This discussion, as Michael did say, is not a knee-jerk reaction to the actions of late, but rather the Morgan-Wixson has been started this work about a year ago by creating the DEI committee and began making a concerted effort to make the theater more inclusive and reflective of the community at large. As a teacher, I've always used the arts of a certain time period to teach my students what the people were thinking, what they were feeling. The arts such as literature, art, music, theater is a wonderful reflection, a wonderful window to what people are thinking. And that's why it is so important that the Morgan-Wixson is taking these steps of growth towards total inclusion. However, for this to truly happen, there must be complete community buy-in and support. So we're going to start off with a little of activity.
Okay, this activity is called Check Your Privilege. And Cori and I we are going to be holding up our fingers, our 10 fingers, and we're going to ask you to do that in the privacy of your own home. If you choose to do it, great. If you don't, that's fine also. But what we will do is we will hold up our 10 fingers, and then there will be a phrase that will be read to you. Now, as the phrase is read to you, you will just put down one finger or you'll leave your fingers up. It just all depends on how you can respond to the phrases that are being said to you.
Okay, so
Okay.
so and you might have heard this already or heard some variation of it, and it, like we said, it is called check your privilege. So okay, I just lost it on my phone. Hold on. Okay.
Check your privilege edition. Put a finger down if you've been called a racial slur. Put a finger down if you've been followed in a store unnecessarily. Put a finger down if someone has crossed the street to avoid passing you. Put a finger down if you had someone clench their purse in an elevator when you came in. Put a finger down if you had someone step off an elevator to keep from riding with you. Put a finger down if you have been accused of not being able to afford something expensive. Put a finger down if you have had fear in your heart if you've been stopped by the police. Put a finger down if you've never been given a pass on a citation that you deserved. Put a finger down if you've been stopped or detained by police for no valid reason. Put a finger down if you've been bullied solely because of your race. Put a finger down if you've been denied service solely because of the color of your skin. Put a finger down if you've ever had to teach your child not to get killed by the police. Any fingers left? That is privilege.
So that gives you a little bit of an idea of what privilege is.
Yes, and as you could see, I had no more fingers left to put down because I had already put them down after 10 had been said. So,
and I put one down, if I may interject, because the only one I put down is in relation to my African-American daughter, where I had to actually have a conversation with her on how to behave if and when she ever gets stopped by a policeman.
Right. And actually, I did put my finger down where it said, if you ever had to teach your child not to get killed by the police. Now, I don't have kids, but I do have nieces and nephews, and this is a conversation that's come up multiple times. So what I'd like to do, I would like to debrief with you, and I just have a few questions that I want to ask, and you have a chat window or a chat box, and if you'd like to make any comments or responses in the box, feel free to do so, and Cori and I will talk to you.
And we'll answer them, or we can share them with everyone.
Right. So my first question for you is, how did you feel being asked these questions? Now, if you don't want to write anything, that's totally fine, but just kind of check in with yourself. How did you feel about that? Cori, how did you feel?
Honestly, for me, it was the one where you had to teach your child not to get killed by a police officer. That's the one that really kind of struck a chord with me. But the other ones really, I felt empathy, but because race for me is not an issue, I can't identify with that. And so that's the hard thing. Right. Another question, and these are questions that if you can, I see that someone has made a comment that said embarrassed. Thank you, Michael. Yeah, I am embarrassed too that I could only lower one finger. Another question would be, what was going through your mind when you were asked these questions? If anyone has anything they want to share.
Yeah. I mean, I can say for me, what was going through my mind was, wow, I can't even believe that I'm sitting here, one, being asked these questions, two, putting my fingers down for everything.
We've had a couple of questions about whether the chat is being enabled. Michael, is the chat enabled to everyone? The chat is now enabled. Thank you. And there we go, our first IT issue of the night. So yes, so the chat is now enabled if you would like to. If you have any comments that you'd like to do, I know that initially when Tisha and I were planning this conversation, we want this to be a conversation. It's as we are not teaching to you, but have a conversation about this.
Yes, just a dialogue. And I'm sorry if you see me leaning in, trying to read the chat box.
She's old.
Yeah, my eyes are bad. Not a lot, just bad eyes.
Anyway, I see that someone said that they felt sad. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can understand that.
Yeah. What did you think when you saw the two of us sitting together and Cori only lowered one finger? Anyone? Nothing? Okay.
Well, that's okay. Not
No, that's
surprised.
fine.
Yeah.
Horrified.
Horrified. Yeah, we see that. Angry that this isn't the life that everyone gets. Really sad. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
Yeah, reality.
it is our reality.
Yeah.
Well, and it is a reality. And the first time we saw this, Tisha shared this exercise with me through it's Twitch did it, and that's what made us think about it. When I saw it, I know the first time I saw it, and it's a biracial couple with a mixed child, and it really resonated with me because it really hit home because of my own child. It really shows the different levels of privilege. It does. Well, that is a great segue,
yes,
Margaret. The underlying theme of this talk is to pretty much show how race can be a major factor in everyday parts of life. As we first said, and as Michael said, we are both right now, we have very similar backgrounds. We're both tokens in our community. I was the token Jew at a private school, Jewish person. Mm-hmm. Tisha was the token
Black girl at an all-girls Catholic high school, and also I just went to like a Catholic elementary school, and so I was always the Black student that was going through my schooling.
We both attended UCLA. We both have master's degrees in education, as Tisha said, and we both have the exact same job. We both teach 8th grade U.S. history at John Adams Middle School in Santa Monica. And we've worked together for how long? A long time.
Yeah,
really long time. Me a lot longer. So, but before we get started, that's kind of like the underlying theme is how race can impact major life. So what we want to do is I would like to share with you, before we get started, a short video. And here I go again with the technical issues. Let's see here, share my screen, hold on. Okay. So I'm going to share this.
My sister-in-law, who's half black, half white, but looks white, blue eyes, whiter than most white folks, very white. She and I, we kind of grew up together. We raised our children together. So they're first cousins, and it's the wonderful, very, very multicultural family. So we're going in a Safeway one day. And Kathleen, my sister-in-law, is in front of me. And she's, writing a check for her groceries. Now, my daughter, who at the time was 10 years old, was standing with me, and I was directly behind her, getting ready to get my groceries. So Kathleen comes up, and the checker, who's a strawberry blonde, freckled, very delightful, warm, the checker, this young woman, is talking to Kathleen. Hey, how you doing? This is a nice day today. They're just chatting up. And she says, yeah. So Kathy writes her check, and she steps off to the side with her groceries because she's waiting for me. Of course, again, Kathleen looks white, right? So I come up. No conversation. She looks up at me. Absolutely no, just a little chatter. And I write my check. My daughter, however, is 10, notices immediately the difference in how she responds to me. So I write my check, and she goes, I'm going to need 2 pieces of ID. At which point, my daughter looks at me, and she gets very, very embarrassed, and tears are kind of coming up in her eye, like, Mommy, you're not gonna let her do this. Why is she doing this to us, right? So I'm trying to figure out what I should do, because behind me are 2 elderly white women, right? And I'm thinking, okay, so then I become the angry black woman, right? And they're gonna be, and I'm just trying to second guess all the drama. So then I just give her the 2 pieces of ID. I said, some things you got to choose your battles, right? And then it gets worse. She pulls out the bad check book, right? So this is the book that shows the people who've written bad checks. So she starts searching for my license in the bad checks, at which point it's just out of control now. Just as I'm standing there trying to decide what to do, and it's really deeply humiliating. Now my daughter is in full-blown emotionally upset, who's 10. My sister-in-law walks back over. And she steps in and she says, "Excuse me, why are you doing this?" And the checker goes, "Well, what do you mean?" She goes, "Why are you taking her through all of these changes? Why are you doing that?" She goes, "Well, this is our policy." She goes, "No, it's not your policy because you didn't do that with me." "Oh, well, I know you've been." She goes, "No, she's been here for years. I've only lived here for 3 months." And so at this point, the two white elderly ladies go, "Oh, I can't believe what this checker has done with this woman. It is totally unacceptable." At which point the manager walks over. So the manager walks over and says, "Is there a problem here?" And then my sister-in-law again responds. She goes, "Yes, there is a problem here. Here is what happened." So you see, she used her white privilege. And even though Kathleen is half black and half white, she recognizes what that means. And she made the statement. She pointed out the injustice. And she, as a result of that one act, influenced everyone in that space. But what would have happened? I can't know for certain had the black woman said, "This is unfair. Why are you doing this to me?" Would it have had the same impact? But Kathleen knew that she walked through the world differently than I did. And she used her white privilege to educate and make right a situation that was wrong. That's what you can do every single day.
Oh, nope. Okay. So anyway, does anyone have any questions or comments that they would like to share after seeing that video? Let's see here. Oh, thank you. Well, one of the things that we, the idea of white privilege and how white privilege impacts how we are treated has permeated all facts of life. And with that being said, what we want to do is we'd like to take a moment. Hold on, I'm having technical difficulties right now. Oops. Take a few moments to kind of share our experiences, because Tisha and I, who teach at the same school, have the same experience, yet teach the same but don't have the same experience. Want to share ours. So my journey with race is a complicated one. About 20 years ago, and I've been teaching at John Adams Middle School my entire career, I used to, with my previous colleague, teach a lesson that was a reenactment of a slave ship. And it was a lesson plan that was written by an African American. It was a published lesson plan. And we had done it for a few years, and it seemed to resonate with the students. And one year, a parent whose child had already gone through the lesson with me, he repeated 8th grade, did it with my colleague, and the parent was upset and went ahead and videotaped the lesson. Long story made short, the videotape of the lesson made it onto the news. And we were asked to present our lesson to the African American support group. And, every news station was there watching us. And needless to say, or without going into further detail, my colleague and I were accused publicly of teaching a racist lesson. At the time, I didn't understand where they were coming from, where the families were coming from. I was so caught up in my bubble and my self-perception of being like this liberal Jew that I can never think of myself as racist. My white privilege was so ingrained in me that I could not step outside of myself and take a hard look at my thoughts, my actions, and also my inactions. Also, being a white teacher at a very diverse school, I think our school is about 60% of color, would you say, conservatively? Yeah. It was not unheard of for me to be called a racist anytime a student or a parent did not approve of my actions, they were upset about something. And every time this happened, my knee-jerk reaction was always to get defensive, get angry, how dare they, if you will. Instead, I should have actually listened and heard. Regardless of whether or not I thought that there was merit in accusations, I really should have just listened. See, my point being is that the greatest social fear is for whites to be told something they did or something they said is racially problematic. When we are told, most whites respond in anger and denial. Instead, we should actually respond with gratitude. And looking back at it, I really wish I would have said, thank you, I need to be heard. And even in our 16 years together, when Tisha has called me out on stuff initially I would get I would get a little defensive, but now I've learned to say thank you, because that's the actual act of listening to someone and hearing someone is both valuable and painful at the same time.
Right. So you've just heard Cori's experience and her being called a racist. I've never been called a racist at school, but I will tell you that my intelligence and my temperament have been called into question multiple times. And I have to tell you, it gets tiring, you know, because again, I went to UCLA. I have a master's degree. My credentials are just the same as my counterpart, but yet and still my intelligence is questioned. I remember vividly, it was earlier on when I had just started teaching at John Adams. There was a back to school night, and you know, I had a classroom full of parents, and you know, it's again, because my intelligence is called into question a lot, I feel the need, and I know it probably seems bad, but I feel like I have to put my degrees up to show, you know, hey, I'm just as qualified as anyone else. And so I had my degrees on the wall. I had, you know, my UCLA diploma. I had my master's degree from Pepperdine on the wall. And it was after I gave my speech, I talked about, you know, what I was going to do with the kids and how our year was going to go. A parent walked up to me and said, "You went to UCLA?" And I said, "Oh yeah, you know, I went to UCLA." And he looked me up and down and said, "We'll see about that," and walked away. Now, what did that mean? I didn't know, but I'll tell you, for the rest of the school year, that person was on me the whole entire school year, questioning everything that I did and kept trying to get other people to rally behind him. That's just one instance. I can come up with many instances. I have had an anonymous letter sent to my principal accusing me of trying to teach, you know, President Obama's agenda.
Now, if I may interrupt, bear in
Yeah.
mind something. In my classroom, I have pictures. I have the portrait, the official portrait of Obama and Michelle on my wall. I have the posters. I have Harriet Tubman. I have Martin Luther King posters on my wall. I have 2 posters from previous Democratic National Conventions on my wall. Never once has anyone ever accused me of that. If anything, someone many, many years ago accused me of said I have too many I'm sorry, I don't have enough white people on my walls.
Right. I've had the N-word written in textbooks and on desks. I've had a note that was slipped under my door, which was very threatening and scary. And so much so I took it to the police because I was very afraid, I guess, which nothing ever happened about that. So it's just, you know, some of the things that I have to put up with that
I've never had to deal with that.
Yeah.
And even to the point where there's, you know, we'll be talking and she's like, "Oh, this parent claims or, you know, attacked her for this." And my response has always been, well, you know, especially when you say.
Yes, I get a lot. Well, my child's intimidated by you. You intimidate my child. What do you mean by that? You just intimidate them. Well, I know what that means. But, you know, or my child doesn't like the way you look at them. Or they don't like your tone of voice. Sorry, I can't change the skin that I'm in, and I can't change my voice because this is the voice I was born with. When I know that I've had other counterparts who may have raised their voice, but it's okay. So it's just, I get called out on a lot more than others.
And at what point when she said to, Tisha said to me, well, they said, you know, a parent accused me of, you know, intimidating my child. My instinct, what I said, and this comes, again, before I became, I guess, for lack of a better term, more woke, would you say?
Yes, more woke.
It was maybe because you're so tall, because if you can't tell, she's much taller than I am. And I'm like, and she's like, no, it's the color of my skin. But then when I really started to like talk and have conversations with other teachers of color at my school, that's when I realized that it wasn't about height, it's about race. Mm-hmm. And this is parents that I've had. And although I tend to be a little bit more sarcastic than you, I've never in 28 years of teaching had a parent come up to me and say, you know what, my kid's intimidated by it. I've been called other things, but I've never had that happen to me. So, yeah. And then what about you want to share about the promotion thing?
Yeah, so just recently, with the whole COVID situation, we were trying to figure out how are we going to do our presentation or our promotion for the kids. And so I had been watching LeBron James. He did this whole high school graduation for students. And there was this great idea where he had students' pictures pop up in the screen as they were singing their song or playing the musical instruments. And so in the middle of our meeting, I had said, hey, I have a great idea. And I explained about LeBron James, and I said, why don't we try this? Why don't we have the kids come up in the screen, like record each of the Zoom screens and then have them do the music? And silence, crickets.
I think I even said, and I'm sorry about that, I even said, Tisha, that takes a lot of work.
No, we can't do that. So I said, okay, fine. About 2 minutes later, all of a sudden, another teacher says, hey, I've got an idea. And it was the exact same idea.
And it was a white teacher.
And everyone's like, oh my God, that's so good. That's great. And guess what we did? That.
We did. But even and this is one of the things that we're trying to share with is that my process, I'm going through a journey with dealing with race even now, and being a white mother of an African-American child, it's going to be a lifelong process, as I know, is that even at the time that when Tisha mentioned it to me, I did dismiss it, and I did that it was race related. I'm like, well, it was the choir teacher, it was this. And it wasn't until another African-American teacher kind of chimed in and said, no, it was race. That's when it really hit me. And it made me realize that how pervasive it is, that it's happening in our own, happens in our school, it happens with our colleagues. These are all colleagues we all think as liberal because we teach in Santa Monica and we teach kids of color, that it really just kind of hit home. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
But I'm used to it.
But
that doesn't sound good.
Yeah, but it's something that happens. So
yeah. Any questions?
Are there any questions?
Let's see here. Thank you. So does anyone have any questions or comments or want to share any experiences? You can either, if you want to put it, Cori, you said you were a little bit more sarcastic. Tisha, do you feel allowed to be sarcastic? That's a great question.
I don't, because I feel that if I am a little bit sarcastic, then it'll be taken to a different level than if it. No, I don't.
And I'm sorry.
No, and I just feel like, a lot of times, sometimes I feel like I have to walk on eggshells, and I'm very guarded with what I say because, I don't want to be accused of anything, or I don't want to get in trouble, so to speak. So I'm always trying to I'm not perfect, trust me, but I'm always trying to do the right thing so that I don't get in trouble. I don't like to get in trouble.
Well, one of the things that we've talked about is that through the years of teaching together is that I get away with a lot more. And would you say that I'm able to get away a lot more? And the other thing is that there are even male teachers at our school that push the boundaries. And I know there's probably some parents in this, and they probably know who we're talking about. but they're great teachers, but they really do push the boundaries of what is acceptable, appropriate, and they get away with more than even us. I mean, there's obviously a scale that they get away with a lot more because we're women, whereas they can say things I would never think of saying in the classroom.
Right.
So it is definitely unfortunate that happens.
Right. I think we have some questions.
I'm sorry, yeah.
I can't see.
Okay, I'll read it for you. Okay, did anyone make any notion of it in the meeting? Did anyone realize when we were talking about when we talked about promotion?
So it was brought to me in a private conversation from a colleague. So yes, but that colleague didn't want to be called out or bring it out into the open either.
Okay, but I don't think anyone really did. Unfortunately, it wasn't Zoom, and I do accept ownership because I was leading the meeting, but it was one of those things where I will accept responsibility that I was trying to move the meeting forward. So I was not able to I did not allow for the space for you to be heard. And that was what my mistake was. Another question was, what are some ways that we can start to change this, especially in our schools? Whoa. That's a whole conversation in itself, Margaret. I mean, some of the things that we are going to be talking about, as we go forward and talking about white privilege and microaggressions, and at least before we can change on a global level, we really need to, the purpose in us doing this is that hopefully people will start to at least look inward and look at maybe their thoughts, their feelings, their actions, their inactions, because it has to start with you. It has to start with us. It has to start on an individual level, because unfortunately, we all have bias, and it's pervasive, and whether or not it comes out is a whole different, that's a whole other conversation. Right. If you get more used, I hope you get more used to hearing sorry and being able to say thank you makes me feel better. Thank you. Thank you. Let's see, did your principal dismiss your idea and then praise the white teacher for the same idea? Because this makes me think that administration needs to begin their journey in anti-racism.
Well,
oops.
Well, it was all Cori that was doing it.
It was me. I will have to say, it was me leading it. The principals were part of it. My intent was not to dismiss her. It just, in my own idea, was that when Tisha, and this is, I'm going to justify where I was coming from on this, is that when Tisha described it, and I had just seen the LeBron James video, I was thinking this grandiose, produced idea, and I wasn't really listening. And I think that's when it comes down to it, the underlying theme here is actually being able to listen. Let's see here. The difference between you two, your experiences at work is so striking. Thank you both for sharing. Thanks, Jody. It has been exhausting to constantly be on guard on everything you say to your students.
Yep, and that's constantly. We can talk about some of the things, the lessons that you've done and that I've done, that I've had to be careful because I don't want to be called out on anything. So it is exhausting.
Going back to Margaret's comment of what can be done, it's the biggest thing. The starting off point is actually having. How many teachers of color are there at your school? There are 3 African American women. Maybe how many?
No, 4 now. There's 4.
Oh, there is. Okay.
Yeah, myself. 4.
Okay.
No, 5.
Oh, wow. Wow, we're moving up. So I would say probably out of a staff of.
But at that time, there was
3. And I think, no, there's only 2 because Tara wasn't there. Oh, that's right. I forgot. Yeah. So I think that there would be, let's see here, pointing out, oh, wow. Okay. I think there's probably I would say our staff is probably about 20% of color. Would you say, is that conservative? 25%?
Yeah.
Of color in a school that is 60% of color. And it's not so much the administration's fault. I think there is a general, and I saw something recently that a statistic of how few African-American men are going into teaching and how there's a lack of diversity in going into grad school and so forth. Would you both be able to model for us a conversation pointing out a racial microaggression in a friend and how to respond appropriately?
We actually were going to talk about microaggressions, and there was this fabulous article that I found on microaggressions, 5 microaggressions, and if you'd like, we can probably cut and paste the link into the chat box and
A little bit later,
and then make it available to you. But yeah, we'll talk about microaggressions, definitely.
So if I may,
yes.
Nick? Okay, so one of the things that in order for change to happen is that there needs to have conversations, and talking about race is very difficult, especially for white people. One of the things when I was talking about in my experiences, I talked about being called a racist and being a racist. And that might have struck a chord with some people, especially those of you that I know, that I would be so honest and actually accept that. One of the obstacles that prevent people from really having those honest conversations is that whites really have a simplistic understanding about race and racism. When we refer to racism, or the new racism, we're not talking about the stereotypical images that come to your head, the KKK, the skinheads, the white supremacists. Racism can also exist in the lack of action or silence. Racism is not black or white, excuse the pun, but rather the new racism, or the racism of today, really exists in those gray areas. No one really claims to be racist anymore, but it still exists in our silence. Example of this actually happened quite recently to me. Last week, I was on a vacation with my family, and there were a few comments that were made. I was not involved in the conversation, but I was on the periphery, in which family members made a few racially insensitive comments, inappropriate comments, made comments disparaging marginalized people, and I didn't say anything. And the reason I didn't say anything is I made an active choice, which I deeply regret now. I made a choice to not rock the boat. There's a little family drama there, but I made a choice that I didn't want to call out these people for what they said. And in doing so, because I chose to be silent, which, as I said, I deeply regret now, I become complicit in this behavior. And that is one of the things that, in order to move forward, is that not only do we need to look outward, we need to feel comfortable to talk to people and feel comfortable enough and come from a place, it's the way you phrase it, the way you have that conversation, which you could actually call someone out with and make it a teachable moment. And so that's when we talk about racism today, yeah, you see, the stuff in the news, you see what's happening to African Americans by the police, you see the march in Charlottesville, but the more insidious racism is what's happening today. And with these, innuendos, this lack of action. Another example, do you want to bring up the other example that they may be able to relate to? Next door.
Oh, sorry, I was just listening to you talk. So I'm sure a lot of you, or maybe not, have signed up for Nextdoor. And on Nextdoor, there's a lot of conversation that goes on Nextdoor. And so I'm signed up for Nextdoor in my area as well as in Santa Monica. And just last week, there was an op-ed that was written in the Los Angeles Times from a woman that actually lived in Santa Monica, a Black woman that lived in Santa Monica. And it was produced, like I said, in Los Angeles Times, but then someone uploaded it to Nextdoor and put it on Nextdoor. And so I don't know if any of you have seen that article, but it was titled Nextdoor Letter from Black Mother in Santa Monica. And this mother, is that it? There you have it.
Thank you, Mariette.
Thank you. So basically this mother has talked about her experiences in Santa Monica. And also her experiences on Nextdoor. And because of some of the experiences that she has had that have been racially charged on Nextdoor, she now chooses not to be on it anymore. And I would strongly encourage you to read the article for yourself to see what she has said. So that's basically all that I wanted to really say about it.
Okay, so there was a question. Do you think that with the movement and progression of Black empowerment right now, does Tisha feel more comfortable speaking up?
Yes, I do. You know, I feel like we're getting to a place where people are really open and ready to listen. You know, so I do feel more comfortable speaking up. Yes.
One of the conversations we've had is as we've watched and, you know, everything that has kind of come about, and, you know, being history teachers, we've reflected on past movements, so like the civil rights. We look, you know, after Rodney King, like, you know, even after the Civil War, and we've talked about like whether this has sustaining power, or is this just a reflection of everyone being really frustrated with COVID and just, you know, it's an outlet. And one of the things that I think for the first time, when that really gives at least me hope as a white of a Black child, that there will be change, is that not only are people, you know, marching about and continue marching, refuse to let it, you know, die down. It's that people are actually, if you look like on the New York Times bestseller list or the Amazon bestseller list, those books like How to Be an Anti-Racist or White Fragility, those are the books that are trending. Those are the books that are, you know, really, you know, being bought finally after they've been out for a couple of years. But people are really starting to, you know, at least not take what's going on in the outside and come back inside. Mm-hmm. So that gives me hope.
Yeah. And I just hope that people continue to speak up, not be silent about what's going on.
So there is one comment. I agree, Nextdoor is filled with many racists. I've noticed people calling them out as of late. I'm definitely going to read the article. Thank you. So in most cases, racism has really become much more subtle. And as I just said, it's just as insidious, which allows whites to maintain their self-image. An example of these types of racism is microaggressions.
Mm-hmm. And so I just want to touch upon what is microaggressions. And really, I just wanted to read a definition to you instead of me just saying it, so you can really get the full essence of it. And it's a behavior or communication, spoken or unspoken, that feeds into stereotypes and stigmatizations of gender, race, orientation, religion, or other marginalized groups. Okay, so microaggressions can be intentional or unintentional, sorry about that. So let's see, there's 3 types of microaggressions. There's micro assaults, micro insults, and micro invalidations. And let me see, someone had asked, what are some examples of them?
Well, I pulled this up.
That's the racial
Yes.
gaslighting. So, all right, so micro assaults. These are intentional and made to degrade someone based on their race. Okay, so for example, doing a racial slur. So when that note was slipped underneath my door, calling me the N-word and the B word and all that, that was definitely a micro assault because it meant to, you know, degrade me, insult me, slurs, everything. Micro insults, they can be intentional or unintentional, whether they're verbal or nonverbal. So an example of that would be if a Black person is walking down the street and they're walking towards you and all of a sudden you clutch your purse, okay, or your handbag, or if they get into an elevator. Or another one would be asking a Black person, is your hair real? Okay, that's another one. If you want to go as far as, you know, not to say it to a Black person or a person of color, you know, saying, oh, I didn't know they were gay. You know, so those are micro insults.
And there's always a follow-up like, oh, well, you're gay. Do you know this person? You know, like that type, that's a That's a micro assault as well.
Yeah, yeah. I would get that a lot. Not are you gay, but like, oh, you're from this city. You must know this person, or you must know this other Black person, or, oh, you know what? My cousin is dating someone that's Black. So those are micro insults. A micro invalidation could also be intentional and unintentional, and they are subtle and casual jabs. So, can you think of one?
Like an example would be, I'm trying to think of one. Okay, or so an example would be like having a woman doctor being mistaken as a nurse would be an example of one.
Or I have a friend, she's Latina, and her son has blonde hair. And so she was approached, and they asked her, if she, was the nanny. And she's like, oh, this is my child. So those are some examples of that.
Any questions or comments? Question your intelligence and your education. That's an example.
Oh,
that's good. That's a really good one.
Thank you for bringing that up, Heidi. Was that Heidi?
Yeah.
Or
no,
Chris?
That's Chris.
Chris, thank you.
My Black principal is constantly hearing, you are the principal.
Yeah.
I think I know which school that is from. Is there any other questions or, experiences you'd like to share? Are we here? So one of the, you know what? I think we have something we can share. I just realized this.
Yes.
In fact, we have a video we're going to share with you. See, you can tell we're teachers. Hold on a second. Let me go here. Okay, let's go Chrome. Wait, okay, hold on a second. Having technical difficulties again. There we go. Now let me go back. Sorry about that.
While she's doing that, I can tell you another one too. Just given my name. Oh, your name is so hard to pronounce. Can I call you something else?
Okay, let's see here. We're gonna click on here. Okay, so here we'll do a short video to explain.
For people who still don't think that microaggressions are a problem.
Oh, you're so well spoken.
Oh, just imagine, instead of being a stupid comment, a microaggression is a mosquito bite.
Ugh, it's a compliment.
Mosquito bites and their itch are one of nature's most annoying features. But if you're only bitten every once in a while.
No, where are you really from?
Cleveland.
Sure, it's annoying, but it's not that big a deal. The problem is that some people get bitten by mosquitoes a lot more than other people. I mean, a lot more. Whether it's on a date.
Oh, your English is so good.
Excuse me?
Going grocery shopping.
Everything happens for a reason.
I'm just buying apples.
Commuting to work.
So when are you going to have a baby?
Watching TV.
We have to keep the Redskins name. It's part of our culture and history.
Or just walking down the street with your partner.
I couldn't even tell you were gay.
Mosquitoes seem to pop up everywhere.
Do you know John? Can you shopping at so I live here too.
And getting bit by mosquitoes every goddamn day.
Can I touch your hair?
Multiple times a day.
So pretty. Can I touch it?
Is fucking annoying. And makes you want to go ballistic on those mosquitoes. Which seems like a huge overreaction to people who only get bit every once in a while.
It's just a mosquito bite. Who cares? Just another angry Black woman.
Of course, beyond just being annoying, some mosquitoes carry truly threatening diseases that can mess up your life for years.
Astrophysics? Maybe you should try this challenging major.
Ow, my dreams.
And other mosquitoes carry strains that can even kill you.
It looked like he was up to trouble, okay? I felt threatened.
So next time you think someone's overreacting, just remember, some people experience mosquito bites all the time.
You're all so exotic. Wow.
And by mosquito bites, we mean microaggressions.
Okay, so anyone have any questions or comments?
I'll tell you, as we were watching that video, the one part where they were talking about the counselor telling the student about the major that they wanted. Actually, when I was in high school, I had talked to my counselor because I was planning on going to college, and I told my counselor that I wanted to go to UCLA, and my counselor laughed at me and said, "Why don't you just try to go to the local city college and see where you can go from there?" Thank God I didn't listen to that counselor, because I actually ended up going to the college that I wanted to.
Go Bruins. The other thing that resonates with me is, it's funny, when I watched that video, which I didn't catch the first time, thank you, Miriam, for sharing it with me again and reminding me about it, is that we're going to actually, the grocery store, I'm going to actually talk about that one in a second, that the video link is, which is the video link? That
Which
the grocery store, which is
the
the
one
video
that we just showed?
The one that we just showed, is that the one you're asking about that we shared? Yes, okay. So one of the things that resonated with me when I was watching that is that my daughter has very curly hair, and a lot of times she'd wear it up in a little poof, and I would, everyone would go out and touch it. And Tisha for years kept saying, "Stop allowing people to touch her hair." And her friends would go up and touch it. And I didn't understand, and I kind of dismissed her, which, is a subtle form of racism, because I didn't understand. And it wasn't until I was in a bias training, and sorry, Tisha, the person leading the training had a shirt that she was African-American, says, "No, you cannot touch my hair." And at that point I was like, oh my God. And it was only at that point, like, I dismissed Tisha. And I actually, at that point, went up to my daughter, Maya, I said, "Maya, does it bother you that people touch your hair?" She goes, "Yes." And I looked, and I would felt so badly, because I just didn't understand. I never bothered to listen. And, one of these things, the reason I share this with you is because especially over the last 10 years of my daughter's life, but even more so now, given that we do have a lot more time, and I've been doing a lot more reading, and I've really kind of dived into this journey about race, and really have spent a lot of painful moments even looking at my own actions, is that in order for change to happen, is I need to own up. I need to accept responsibility for my own actions. In order to, make it go global, I guess, for lack of a better term. Any questions or comments? So one of the terms you've probably heard a lot about, you've heard us refer to, is white privilege. White privilege, another issue. I just lost where, I lost my, hold on, I lost our chat window. Hold on one second. There we go. Okay, I lost it. With white privilege, a white privilege is basically an unearned advantage. And by the nature of our skin, I have this privilege. An example of white privilege is, imagine a child born to a very wealthy or affluent family. That child is born into a set of opportunities that would benefit him or her, regardless of whether he or she is mediocre or he or she is exceptional, just by the nature of where they're born. That is what white privilege is. It's that unearned advantage. As we, or I, as a white person, have that. Now, white privilege, or being white, really shapes our perspectives, our experiences, and our responses. We have white privilege because we belong. If you look at media and you look at advertising, it's only until recently that you start seeing people of color or other marginalized groups. I can't even think about, when I look at prior, let's say 5 or 6 years ago, when I look at even television shows, like if you wanted to see a television show that was centered around a family of color, you would have to go to a certain, I think it was CW or something was the station that had that. It wasn't until Blackish came on that started this movement of having these family shows that portray families of color. And then not only that, if you look at, for example, teachers, how many of you have actually had teachers of color? Really? When you can think about, when I think about my I haven't had any teachers of color in my experience. I mean, I had a few professors in college, but I never did. And it's only when you get to college that you will see people of color there, but not having teachers that are of color. When you think about what is the standard definition of beauty, it is the blonde, Baywatch type of person, all these things really send a very straightforward message of who belongs and who is in the majority and who matters. The other thing that factors into white privilege is that whites have the freedom from burden of race. We or I don't have to worry that my race is going to be held against me. It's not an issue. In fact, when Tisha and I have had a conversation at what age we talked about race.
Yeah. I mean, I had the conversation when I think it was 5, when we had the conversation about race. But being a Black person, we talk about race every single day because it's thrown in our faces every single day. When I walk into a room, the first thing that people see, they don't see, that, I'm intelligent, that, whatever. They see the color of my skin and they go from there. That's the first thing. So race is something that's constantly discussed.
And it's funny because when Tisha asked me at one point, she was, well, at what point did your family talk about race or what it means to be white? I mean, we never did. I mean, we talked about how I was raised in a very liberal house, that we treat everyone equally and that, you respect everyone and, not only ethnic, different, diverse people, but, all, you treat, a service person as well as you would treat like a CEO of a company. That's the way I was raised, but I was never taught about race. And the thing that's embarrassing to me is that having a Black child, I didn't even think to have the talk until I actually watched an episode on Blackish. And I literally was watching this episode. I'm like, oh my God, and my daughter was 8 years old. And I called Tisha, I'm like, do I need to have the talk? And she's like, oh yeah. And so the thing is that for me, just this gives an example goes to show how much race does not affect us. Like, it wasn't even in my radar. It wasn't even in my consciousness because I've never had to confront my own race. Mm-hmm. And so that factors in as well. So with that, with being our white privilege, not only do we have the freedom from burden of race, we also have freedom of movement. White privilege means that we can go anywhere and we can move into virtually any space without feeling threatened. We can walk into, both of us can walk into a Louis Vuitton store, and I guarantee you we are going to be treated differently. And because of the color of my skin.
I'm sorry. I don't
Go ahead,
but I'll
please.
give you an example. Here in Santa Monica, I liked Mercedes, so I wanted to go and look at a Mercedes. So I went to the Mercedes dealership, and I was just looking at the used ones. I was on the car lot. No one approached me. I was there for I don't even know how long. And there were other people on the lots, and salespeople kept going up to, other people and helping them. And finally, I was just like, okay, what's going on? And I had to go get a salesperson to come help me. So that goes to speak to what you were saying.
Yeah, and because they wouldn't have taken someone of color more as serious as if I would have walked on the lot as well. The other thing that kind of perpetuates the white privilege is the idea that whites are just people. Like, whites are never named. You never say when you're referring to someone, oh, that white person over there. Whereas if you're referring to someone of color, people often use their color as an identifying feature. I know that one of my self-realizations that I've had over the past couple weeks, month, that I've been kind of going through this more intense journey, is that one of the things I've realized, even as a teacher and as someone that I consider pretty woke, is that when I am referring to my students, and I'll refer to a student, I'm like, Johnny, that boy. if he's white. But I found myself, which, you know, I'm embarrassed to admit, that if that kid is of color, I'm like, you know, that black boy or that African-American boy, Johnny. So the fact that I feel or felt, let me rephrase that I need to name a person's color just goes to prove how pervasive white privilege is, and how, like, our first step as people and to elicit change is to identify our white privilege and to use it to become an ally, to use it to support people and so forth. Does anyone have any questions or comments that they'd like to share? Okay.
All right.
So we're good. So, you know, one of the things when we start off the discussion, what does it mean to be white? And what does it mean to be black? What does it mean to be white? I don't get questioned. By the sheer fact of my skin color, I will always be a part of the majority. I will always benefit from my white privilege. I will always be treated better, would you say, and different, and because of that.
What does it mean to be black? Well, I will be questioned for who I am. I'm hoping that people at this point will not look at stereotypes and put Black people into a certain box, because, you know, the movies have done a really good job of stereotyping Black people and not portraying people of color as they really should be portrayed. So for me, what does it mean to be Black? It means that I have to work 10 times harder to try to prove myself. I have to work harder to show that I am just as capable as my white counterpart. I mean, unfortunately, that's where we are. And again, I'm hoping that this movement that we're in right now, this social change, I hope we can move forward so that's not the case for the generations to come.
Does anyone have, we have some questions. Sure. We're going to go back for a second there.
Wait.
Go farther up, I think. Sorry, we're checking. Okay, we got so caught up in our conversation.
Okay, the same thing happens.
Only one in college. She was a Tony. Okay, so one person said the only teacher of color, we're going backwards, was a Toni Morrison literature professor. Well, understand. Same thing happens in scripts when characters are just Joe 30 and a person of color identified by their race, which is true. Andre says, growing up, he was told that second grade teacher was really mean. She was Black. When he moved into second grade, he would be nice to him. The other kid said she was mean because, okay.
And interesting, I get that all the time. Oh, Miss Murphy's really mean. And then, you know, so kids are afraid to come into my class, and then they come into my class and some of them see that I'm not, you know.
And then they come to my class, they think I'm nice, and they come to my class and they know I'm mean. But that's true as well. Let's see here. Can Ms. Murphy share the link for the microaggressions? I am going to do that right now.
It's a website called Pure Wow, and it's really, it's great. It's really informative. If you want to learn about racial gaslighting, if you want to learn about microaggressions, if you want to learn about different, there's a lot of different topics. Again, white privilege. It's a really good website.
And, you know, I just want to say that many more have comments, please chime in and I'll stop. But, you know, in having this conversation, Tisha and I spent quite a long time prepping for it. Our original notes were probably like 8 pages long. We had we wanted to address, you know, being an anti-racist, being a white privilege. We wanted to talk about all these things, but the thing is, there's so much there, and we didn't want to inundate people. And we're hoping by us sharing our experiences and how two people that are very similar in many ways could have such different experiences in life, we'll hope you realize that, that everything we say or do, whether intentional or not, our actions, our interactions do have an impact. And more often than not, because of our implicit bias, the biases we all have, which we all do, that to be aware of it and accept responsibility for it. And, it is the first stepping point, thank you, Margaret, is that being honest, because that is the hardest thing, is once you are willing to get to that place to be honest. And as I said before, it's a painful process, but it is also so rewarding, because it's made me, I feel like, as a teacher for a long time, I've never been that teacher that wants to just recycle old lesson plans. Like, I'm always trying to build on it. But also as a teacher, I always feel like I need to build upon myself, and that with race, there's so much there. And I am, as a white mother of a Black child, I feel like I'm going to be, for the rest of my life, I'm going to be a work in progress. And that's what race is about.
Mm-hmm. And I just ask that if you do have a person of color, or a student, if you're a teacher or an employer and you have a person of color come and express their feelings to you, listen. That's all I ask you to do, is listen without judgment. Just listen to what they have to say. Don't make it about you. Just listen to what they have to say.
And I will say that is really hard, because our reaction, our being white, is when people, and even when Tisha's called me out on stuff, my first reaction is it's about me. And I've had, instances where I automatically, you want to shut down. But, it's taken me a lot, and it's been a long process for me to not have that instinct of what's wrong with me, but rather listen and be present and let her be heard. Let's see here. Could you discuss the preference of race reference as African-American? African-American versus Black. Whites are not referred as European Americans. Is this a microaggression to assume that a person of color has African ancestry? I was in Norway. A friend mentioned that he hadn't seen many African Americans in Oslo, to which I respond, do you mean African Norwegians? Made it seem very white American privilege term. Yeah. Do you want to deal with this one?
Yeah, that's, that's a hard one, because there are some people that say, absolutely, I want you to call me African American. And then there's other people that will say, I'm okay being called Black, a Black American. I don't mind being called Black, Black American, or you can call me African American, but I don't look as being called Black a bad thing. I mean, there are a lot of people that are here that are Jamaican or from other places that are Black, but they're not African American. And some get offended if you call them an African American. So it's just, I guess if you want to try to be politically correct, I guess you would say African American, but I don't think that there are people, and I'm speaking for myself, I can't speak for everyone, but I don't think it's bad to say Black.
And we did, we do have a colleague that is Panamanian. And I've said to her in the past, said something about her being African American. She goes, I'm not African American. Mm-hmm. And, just as a preference or a side note, when we were coming up with this, coming up with our notes, I did check in with Tisha. I'm like, should we use African American? Should we use Black? And because I wanted to see what her, out of respect, I wanted to see what she preferred. And, she was fine with it. So that's why we went the route we did.
Right. So yeah. I don't know if that answered your question.
Oh, does it seem as a microaggression assume a person of color has African ancestry? Yeah, is it considered a microaggression?
I don't know. You stumped me there. Well, I mean, I guess that's kind of like saying, yeah, it is, because it's kind of like saying, well, where are you from? Where are you really from? Where are your parents from? That's kind of a microaggression because you're trying to figure out where they're from. I don't know.
You mean like where in Africa are you talking?
No,
but just
like they're just trying to
okay,
figure out
got
if
it.
they're black.
Okay.
You know, if they're black.
I think sometimes it is the intention of how you say it that is true. That's a very good point.
Yeah.
It is intention.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or thoughts you would like to share?
We really appreciate you guys spending your Friday night with us. You know, we really had a nice time talking
We did,
to you.
thank you.
we
And
enjoyed
being
sharing.
open. And that's, I mean, I
Yeah.
know it's one thing avoiding or not seeing Hamilton, but actually being open to hear this, because it is a very painful but very important discussion and journey that all of us must have so that we can go forward, especially in these charged times.
Right.
If there's nothing else, I think we will turn this back over to you, Michael.
You guys think, Andre didn't know he was going to be on camera. Sorry, babe.
Sorry. The other thing we did forget to mention that although we are SMMUSD teachers, this is not a SMMUSD related event. So we had to do that.
Yeah,
So
we have to give that disclaimer.
Yes.
Okay. We're just two people having a conversation.
Okay.
On the African American versus Black question, throughout my life, my friends or guys I've dated, I found it to be a preference many times. Although more recently, more say Black, but we were talking about the intention. If I say, oh, that guy's Black, it's different than, oh, it's that Black guy. You know what I mean? So it's sort of the way you're using the term also has a lot of meaning behind it.
That's true.
We have a few more.
Let's see here.
Go
okay,
up to
I'm going up. Okay, let's see here. Thank you for spending your Friday evening. And hi, Andre. Thank you for hosting and speaking freely on both your experiences. It's a great way for us to have tools to grow and use. Thank you. It is sad that you have to qualify that for your school, the implication that they aren't open to these conversations. Because I'm a teacher in a private school and have had so many PD workshops. I feel I got more out of your conversation. Thank you. That was valuable. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
My guest here wanted to say something.
Oh, okay.
Hi, I'm Andre. I wanted to say thank you so much for taking this time and doing this. It's super important, especially to see the diaspora between both your situations being very similar in education and who you are as professionals and the differences of your experiences. For Black people, you know, Tisha was saying, like, being vulnerable is where we're at right now, where we have been kicking and screaming for a very long time, and people weren't listening, and now the opportunity presents itself where non-Blacks are listening. And so to continue to be vulnerable and to then stand in numbers behind each other. It's like, while you were talking to like the other persons of color, faculty members, like if an incident does happen that's racially charged, does it behoove them to stand by each other? Everyone should be, but does it also behoove them to be like, okay, this makes sense because I can readily understand it because it probably happened to myself. Does that make, you know what I'm saying? As well as with Cori. Listening, I mean, the taking the responsibility that, I mean, that's really ultimately what you said, was taking the responsibility of your privilege and being like, you know, what really struck with me is saying that this is a lifetime situation for you. Has to be hard for a lot of white people that assumes that there was no issue, that they didn't have an issue. It wasn't something that was readily in their lives to have racism, to spout it in the way that we see it as most recognized and not even know. So just again, thank you for your vulnerability and your expertise and your situations and the education that I also learned through you guys.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And to all our attendees, thank you so much. Don't forget that we have more of these discussions coming up from various, the Morgan-Wixson is not trying to teach and pretend like we know. We're learning along with you. And this is just an opportunity to hear and raise voices of people of color. So every 3 weeks, we have more discussions coming up. Hope you'll join us. And also hope you join us for the other Friday nights when we have our play reading for our members. If you have anything else that you did want to mention, you can send it to ideas@morgan-wixson.org. But otherwise, thanks everybody and have a great night. Tisha, Cori, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.